I'm Wes Harper with AWC, and today we're going to go over setup and configuration for an AWS XYR 5000 series wireless transmitter system. First thing we're going to do is talk about some of the components that you guys are going to be receiving when you get the AWS system and their wireless portfolio. This, holding in my hand here, is the wireless radio itself. So this is the transmitter where you're going to have your thermocouple connected to it. At Georgia Pacific, you guys are using Type N thermocouples. This is not a Type N thermocouple. We're just using a thermocouple we had off the shelf just for testing and setup purposes. But this is your wireless transmitter. Along with the wireless transmitter, some of you guys will be receiving a box, an enclosure. Others of you will just be receiving our base radio. The base radio is what actually receives the signal and information from the wireless transmitter. And then you've got the analog output module. So those are the three main components that we're going to be talking about today and telling you guys how you can configure it or set it up differently than the way we're sending it from the factory to you guys. We are setting this up specific to the spec sheets that you guys send us, but you can change ranges and change a number of different factors and components inside the system itself if you want to span it differently because of the way your DCS is spanned. Along with the parts of your equipment that you're going to be receiving, you will also be getting a wireless setup cheat sheet. So this is just going to basically go through and tell you guys all the steps that you need to do if you want to reconfigure one of the transmitters or the base radio. The third and fourth pages of the configuration cheat sheet just show you guys some of the configuration wiring, how and where you're going to attach the wires to the base radio, the analog output module. Scrolling through it, you're also seeing that you're going to need an RS-485 to RS-232 converter in order to program the base radio from your PC. And this is just a step-by-step guide that's going to tell you how to set up each of the different parameters in the base radio.
So in the short little instruction that we'll send you, you can see the radio is connected physically to a 24 volt DC power supply, which is over here, the 15 watt 24 DC power supply. And then the communication between the radio and the analog output module is at the stream terminals, A and B. So they're labeled A and B, and those are tied over to the analog output module A and B. You'll see a top and bottom terminal set, and it doesn't matter which one you connect to because those are a bus. But there is a terminating resistor, 120 ohm terminating resistor that has to be installed. But when you connect your PC, you need to make sure that that is removed. Once you're done with the PC connection, put the terminating resistor back into place. And you can install that just directly on the terminals of the analog output module. The resistor itself, and then each of the outputs, the four outputs from the analog output module, are wired to the terminal strip on the bottom of the box. Alright, the setup that we have in front of you shows that we have a USB cable coming out of the right side of our laptop. It's the white cable. That's a USB to RS-232 converter. And then connected to the RS-232 to USB adapter, we have an RS-232 to 485 converter. And that allows us to connect over to our system and actually tie in to our communication network, our RS-485 network that we need to be able to communicate with our laptop. On the Adaptive Wireless website, you can go to the resources section and then look at the data sheet section, and there under the wireless accessories you'll notice at the bottom you can download the AWS Wireless Manager. That's the software that you'll need on your laptop to be able to go through the configuration steps of the base radio and wireless transmitter. When you connect the USB to RS-232 adapter, it's important to know what COM port is assigned to your laptop, so you can look at that information in the device manager of your Windows 7 laptop. If you would go into the control panel and select device manager, and that will pull up the screen that you see now. If you look under the port section, ports COM and LPT, you'll see that this particular device is the prolific USB to serial COM port, and it's assigned to COM 5. That COM port 5 is important to know to be able to use the adaptive wireless software. The next step is to open up the adaptive wireless software. There's an icon that's placed on the desktop once you install the software. So I'm going to double click on that icon now to open up the software. And then the first thing you need to do is be able to connect to your system. So once everything is physically connected, now we can put in a password, and the default password is just password, all lowercase, PASSWORD, and then we can connect. There is a server component for this software that runs down in the system tray, and that's important too. If you need to adjust the COM port, that's where you would adjust the COM port setting if it's not correct. So after you press the connect button, it's going to go discover all the devices that are physically connected, and you'll see that in the next view of the screen. Down in the system tray, we can look at the RF manager, and we can adjust the COM port if we need to. We can restart the server, and that's basically the parameters that you'll need. Under the options section is where you can adjust the COM port.
Okay, there are two basic ways that you can set up and configure the wireless transmitter itself. You can use the software system, or you can use the two push buttons on the front screen of the transmitter. You've got a next button. The next button allows you to scroll through the different options and parameters that you're going to be configuring, and the enter button actually puts you into that parameter so that you can configure and make the changes that you desire on it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to scroll through. We get to the configuration screen, and we're going to press enter. It's going to ask us for a password. The default password is just 0000. So I'm going to hit the enter button 4 times, and it's going to take me to the set RF screen. I'm going to hit enter to go into that, and it's going to ask me for an RF channel. So we're going to go in and set the RF channel first. This is the channel that you're going to be communicating on between the transmitter and the base radio. It's very important that you make sure that the transmitter is set up to communicate at the same channel that the base radio is. If you happen to have any interference in the middle from other wireless devices, the first thing you should do is check what your RF channel is on the transmitter and the base radio, and potentially change it to a different channel to see if you get a more clear signal. But in this case, we're going to be fine, and we're going to stick with channel 1. We hit enter to accept it, and then I'm going to hit the next button. The next button is our baud rate. It's real important to set up the baud rate. The baud rate is just how fast you're going to be sending an update from the transmitter to the base radio. And here again, it's extremely important to make sure that the same baud rate is accepted for the transmitters as it is for the base radio. In this case, we're going to use 19.2K as the baud rate. So that's acceptable. I'm going to press the enter button, and I'm going to go next, which is my RFID. Now the RFID is specific to each of the transmitters. If you had 6 transmitters in your system, you would have the IDs labeled as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And each of those corresponds to a unique transmitter when communicating to the base radio. So I'm going to hit the enter button here. Since we've only got one transmitter in this system, this is going to be set as 1. There can be up to 100 different transmitters connected to an individual base radio. So in this case, we're selecting 001 to tell the base radio that this is the number 1 transmitter. Now we're going to scroll through, and we're going to select the sensor. The next part of the configuration allows us to go in and select what type of sensor it is. In this case, we're dealing with a type N thermocouple. So it says TCN, which is correct for our case. We're just going to press the enter button. Scroll in. I wouldn't recommend setting any offsets or putting a trim in. unless you really get to a point where you want to set offset curves and stuff in your thermocouple. And that's it. That's all there is to setting up and configuring the transmitter itself. Okay, the next step in the process is we're now going to configure the base radio. The nice thing about it is the base radio, the menu is set up very similar to the transmitter. You've got two buttons on the front. We're going to press the next button until we get to the configuration menu. We're going to press enter, and then once again our password is 4 zeros. So I'm going to hit the enter button 4 times, and that's going to take me into the set the RF screen. So from there we're going to enter in set RF. We're going to go to the RF channel, and just to say it again, we've got 16 options here. There's 16 potential channels. The most important thing to remember is that we set the base radio's channel to the same channel that we have for all the transmitters that are communicating with this particular base radio. In this case, channel 1 is what our transmitter is set to, so that is correct. We're going to press the enter button, and next we're going to go to the baud rate. So we enter in the baud rate. The baud rate is set at 19.2K, which is what's the transmitter is set up to. So that's perfect. We're going to leave that alone. Press the enter button again, and then screen forward to the high RFID. We're going to go into the high RFID, and this one is set at 1 because we've only got one transmitter that's communicating with this base radio. We can have up to 100 transmitters on this unit. So if there was 100 transmitters communicating with the base radio, I would change that number to 100. If there was 10, I would change it to 10. But since there's 1, I'm going to leave that like it is and press the enter button. I'm going to press it 4 times to get through it. And then as you see, as I scroll through to the next option in the menu, it's going to be my exit. So I've completed the configuration of the base radio. I'm going to accept the exit and go back out to my main screen.
Alright, the next step is to actually open up the software and be connected to our base radio through our USB to 232 adapter, and then from there to our RS-232 to 485 adapter. And then when we are connected, we can see the software comes into the section called the field units, and it will list the field units that are actually connected and give me a green indicator on the screen telling me that there is connection to that field unit. And you can take a look here. We have our thermocouple hooked up onto our transmitter, and so it is reading ambient temperature, and by default it's selected to update every 10 seconds. So as I put my hand on it, we'll actually get an update on the screen indicating, you can see the temperature rising, just seeing that indication in the computer software. So what we want to do is we want to go to the output devices, so the base and output devices. If I select that option, it's going to indicate the base radio that we've assigned a tag name in this case for this project. And then down below is the analog output module itself. And this analog output module communicates with the base radio. And if we double click on the analog output module, we can see there's potentially 4 analog outputs. In this case, we've only enabled analog output 1, and we've disabled the 3 other analog outputs. We have scaled from 0 to 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, so our lower return value and upper return value will be indicated on the 4 to 20 milliamp output. And that's really all the configuration that you have to do on the analog output. You can enable a fail-safe level so it won't exceed 23 milliamps, and that's important when connecting to a DCS. We can save this to a file, and later we could load from a file to be able to apply those settings on a future analog output module. Now in the case when you have multiple transmitters and you have more than 4 analog outputs that are needed, you'll have to configure the analog output module address. That is under the base and output devices, again, the analog output module. So in this case, and by factory default, the address is address 3 for the analog output module. But if you have more than one, then each one has to have a unique address. So the second one could be address 4, for instance. In order to configure that address, when you install the Adaptive Wireless Manager software, it also installs a tool that you can set the address. You cannot have the network connected over from the analog output module to the base radio when you do this step. You would have to simply connect the PC USB adapter and then RS-232 to 485 adapter over to the analog output module itself, and then you would open up in your software under all programs of Adaptive Wireless, you would open up the output module configurator. And you would select your COM port, COM5 in our case, and then you can go and set the address of the next analog output module and then just press the set address. And then once it updates, that's all you have to do to set the address of the analog output module.